Hi there. It's really late at my place right now, and I've got to wake up early tomorrow. But I did a stream on Saturday, that was yesterday, and I didn't think that the quality of the stream was very good because the purpose of the stream was to record content for part 19. Right? Didn't think I did very well there because I was a little all over the place, so the video wasn't very smooth. So here I am, and I'm looking to finish this whole recording within an hour or so that I get enough sleep for tomorrow, you know. But yeah, so here I am, and I won't be responding to chat today because I just want to just want to get it over and done with. So let's talk about part 19, all right? Because we have the article over here, and as usual, the article is gonna be available until the video comes out. So what we have here essentially is that part 19 came about because we had a patron and he mentioned that there are a couple of problems with our code all the way up to part 18 so far. Let me just show you the code and you can see what I mean. So the first problem that we have is that, okay, before I show you this, it's loading now, it's gonna take a while. Let me just increase the number of enemies on the scene so that we have more enemies to work with, and then that allows us to level up faster, right? Just gonna increase enemies to say 100 bats. Spawn interval 1, again here 100 bats. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna fill up my inventory slots, and you will find that once I max out all my inventory slots, right? I will not be able to pick up new items, which of course is a problem. Trying to fill up my passives right here. Okay, so I'm just gonna fill up my passives because we have a lot of passives, whereas we only have 6 weapons. So we will not be able to get any more weapons anyway when we have 6 weapons. But because we have like 13 passives, so once I get the maximum number of passives, you will see what I mean. Something will go on. It's pretty obvious. Let me just get one more level and I can show this to you. Huh? So do you see that once I get 6 passives, I still have new passives showing up, and this is not good because I'm clicking on the wings now, but it's not registering at all, which this is one of the issues we have. Second issue we have, okay, I'm gonna just max out my knife over here and I'm just gonna level up, and you will see that after I have maxed out my knife, so the knife is set to max out at level 2. It's different from the other weapons, alright? It's just so that I can show you this bug. I'm just gonna keep leveling up, and sometimes you will find that one slot is missing. Let me just get a garlic here. Okay, it's not happening yet, but it will come soon. I just need a knife, huh? Then I can show you that one slot goes missing 2 times. You see that? So once you max out a weapon, sometimes a slot goes missing, and the reason it goes missing is because of the way our apply upgrade options is coded inside our PlayerInventory. Let me just show you the code and I'll explain to you what I mean. So inside PlayerInventory, we have the apply upgrade options, and this function here basically is responsible for filling up the level up screen when our character levels up. And how this is done is basically, if you look at the PlayerInventory script, right, there will be a slot for, or rather a variable for weapons. My bad, got it wrong. Okay, we have a bunch of available weapons, available passives, and these two are arrays. And then you just fill in all the passives that you want your player to be able to have, and you fill in all the weapons that you want your player to be able to have, and then it will just select a number of weapons and passives and show it on the level up screen. So the reason why we have these bugs is because our logic is a little bit off, and we can go through the code together to see this. Okay, so how ApplyUpgradeOptions works is essentially it gets all the available weapon upgrades and all the available passive upgrades. It makes a duplicate of the list from available weapons and available passives right here. Once it does so, right, it loops through all the upgrade options. Upgrade options are the variables that you have over here. Okay, if you recall, in part 12 of this series, we created these upgrade options, and they are basically the options that you see. Let me just unplay the game and I can show them to you. They're the options that you see right here on the level up screen. Let me just turn off our pause screen over here. So each of the boxes here is an upgrade option, and then if you recall, there are 4 options inside each of the buttons, and then these will be the background, the description, the name, and the option button. So what the play inventory does is that it will loop through, because we have 4 upgrade options here, right? Okay, you loop through all of these options here, and then it will fill up the name of the weapon, the description, and the icon of the weapon, and of course it will arm the button. The button is this whole thing over here. This whole box over here, this is the button. It arms the button with an action to either level up the weapon or add a new weapon to the player character. So we changed this in part 15 as well when we revamped the weapon system, but there are still some quirks with it because the logic is largely from the old system, right? So what's happening here in this system is that once we get a list of all available weapons and passives, we do not check whether these weapons and passives are eligible, because they don't change, right? This list is always the same. But then if you max out a weapon, for example, it shouldn't be available anymore. Or if you max out your inventory slots, it also shouldn't be available anymore. But then the problem is that these options are still available, and it's because we do not check whether these are eligible weapons or not. So we just look through the whole thing and we see whether there are any more available weapons. If there are no available weapons or available passives, then we will just stop doing the apply upgrade options. Otherwise, we will randomly pick an upgrade type of either 2 or 1, or we random between the two. So how we choose this is by, again, seeing if we have any more available weapons. So how this happens is that whenever we have an available weapon or available passive, right, if the weapon is maxed out, we will just remove the weapon from the list. I think it's somewhere inside here, right? Oh, sorry, my bad. Okay, so whenever we add a passive or a weapon onto the level up screen, then what's going to happen is that we'll remove it from this list so that, you know, we don't have duplicates. We won't have like knife, garlic, or something. All right. So this basically just prevents weapon options from repeating themselves. But by and large, we don't check whether any of the conditions are, for example, if the weapon is max level or something, which is a big problem. All right. We just right away after we get all our available weapons and available passives, you just drop them into the upgrade screen. And then what we essentially do is just randomize, and sometimes we'll show a weapon, sometimes we'll show a passive, and that's really all there is to it. And then one thing that is very clunky about how we implement this is if you see over here, there's a piece of code here that basically checks whether the weapon is at max level, and if it's at max level, what we'll just do is turn off the button. Disable upgrade UI is a function that basically turns off the button right here. Yeah, so if we run across a weapon that is max level, we just turn off the option, which is why just now when you saw, because the knife was at max level, sometimes there will be a slot missing, and that's because that was supposed to be the knife, but because it's maximum, that it's max level, it just shuts itself off. So this has a problem also, that if everything is maxed out, then you will just show the upgrade screen without anything in there, and then your game just hangs if you max out everything, which is a problem, right? So you have two problems over here. Your slots are missing, when your slots go missing when your weapon is maxed out, and then also you have new weapons that sometimes you're not able to select because you have no more inventory slots. And then this is what we set out to fix with part 19. And this cascaded into a whole bunch of other issues, into a whole bunch of other things I wanted to fix. But before I move on to that, let's just talk about the new function and what changes are applied to this new function over here, right? So instead of checking, or rather instead of having no checks, okay, what's going to happen here is that first we combine everything into a single list. So if you remember from part 15, right, when we created the available weapons and we created weapons and passives, right? And then both of them are items. So both of them can be treated either as items or separately as weapons and passives, because item is a superclass, right? So what's going on here is that in this new function, instead of treating them as weapons and passives, we are treating everything as an item. The reason for that is because if you look at the old function, right, you will have two branches in the code. Okay, one for upgrade type 1, which is if we random and we select a weapon, and then we will show a weapon upgrade. Otherwise, if we randomly select the passive, and then we will show the passive upgrade. And the codes are more or less the same, so we are just repeating a piece of code twice, which makes the function unusually long. So in this new recode, we are setting out to make the function shorter as well and more readable, on top of course fixing these bugs. So we combine everything into something called available upgrades, and then we have all upgrades over here. So available upgrades is going to be the filtered list, and all upgrades is going to be the all the options, you know. So over here we have a list of all available weapons, and we add all available passives into all upgrades as well. And this will be all the available upgrades that we have. And then we check whether we have any weapon slots left or any passive slots left, and we just count the number of slots over here. Okay, once that's done, right, we will just loop through all our items and all upgrades, and then we will check for a couple of things. We will check if the item is at maximum level. If it is not, then we will add this to available upgrades. Or if the weapon, or rather the item that we select is a weapon, then we will check whether there are any more weapon slots. If there are, then we will add this to the available upgrades. And then we will check if the item is otherwise a passive, and if it's a passive and there are passive slots left, then we will add this to the available upgrades. So you see we have these two layers of checks, right, to make sure that whatever option that shows up in the upgrade screen is a valid option, so that, you know, we won't get unclickable buttons, get missing buttons. All right, we don't want a shut off button when we find that it's max level later on. All right, we want to just do a thorough check first before we actually populate these upgrades into the level up screen. So after that, we of course loop through all the upgrade options, and then we will just populate all the options inside. This whole part here will be replaced later on, but the logic here is essentially the same as before. The difference is only that right now, you know, we have a filter, so then we, instead of having anything else, we just run this block of code once. Okay, this block of code here is very similar to the block of code that you see right above here where we have two branches. Yeah, it's the same thing. So you can see more of the thought process if you want to in this link post over here. You can find the link in the description below in the video when it comes out. Or you, for now, because the article is free, you can also just click on the link in the article and it brings you to the forum topic. So because of this, right, what we did was we recoded the apply upgrade options, and then along that line, we also created a couple of new functions for the PlayerInventory script. And the reason we did that is because firstly, we have to count number of slots. We have to have a function to count number of slots, because previously we didn't have that, which is why we didn't check whether we have enough slots before we offer the new upgrade. And second, we also created a new level up function that allows us to level up an item. And there are two ways you can do that. You can either offer an item as an argument, or you can offer an item data. What's the difference between an item and an item data? If you recall, an item is basically an instance of an item data. So for example, you have knife, right? Okay, so the knife has its own level up information, its own data, so as to speak, right? Okay, for example here. Okay, it has growth data and all that stuff, all inside the weapon data. Okay, this is item data, right? Because weapon data is a subclass of an item data. So the weapon data or the item data, whatever, it stores all the level up information of the item, and then the item itself is You know, for example, if you have a knife weapon on player 1, that's an item. And then if you have multiple players, then you have multiple copies of that item, right? Okay, so when you level up, something, you can either offer the item variable or you can offer the item data. And if you offer the item variable, because the item variable is what stores the level information, right? It just tries to level up the item. And then if you, okay, so what we have here is essentially we added a couple of new functions, and over here the level up function is overloaded, which means that we offer two definitions of it so that you can do the level up using different kinds of variable types. So for now, we are just, if I'm not wrong, in our code, we are using, what are we using? We're using the level up function, right? What we, okay, so let's double check. There we go. So we are attaching the level up function, and then it uses the item version of the level up. So we're just adding one more function here to level up. And the level up function is there to replace the old level up function, because in the old level up function we have level up weapon and then level up passive. And then what it does is that it takes the slot index and the upgrade index, which is a little convoluted, because what we want to do is when you level up something, you previously had to specify what slot it is in, and that was a little bit cumbersome. So what we did instead was we recoded the level up function so that it takes the item variable instead, and it just level ups the item variable right away. Okay, so it makes everything simpler, and because the functions are not divided between level up passive item and level up weapon, so then we can use the same level up function for both weapons and passives, which again allows us to unify both the leveling up process of weapons and passives, which is why again we're able to code everything by representing these things as items instead of as weapons or passives. So this level up function here is just there to allow us to handle the leveling up easier, and then we have an overload here which is currently not used, but allows you to use an item data to level up a specific copy of an item inside the inventory as well. This is just there for convenience at the moment. So we have added two functions essentially, the get slots left over here, and then the level up function right here. Okay, and this allows our new ApplyUpgradeOptions function to work. And the other thing that we did was we also did a minor bug fix over here in the get function inside the PlayerInventory script. So what's happening here is essentially we are, okay, let me just explain how this works, alright? Because over here we have passive. And then what we are doing is that because we are treating this as a passive, right? The item as a passive. So we have to first cast the item as a passive. Otherwise, we will not be able to access the data inside the passive. But then when we cast an item as a passive, what if this item is empty? Or if this item turns out to be a weapon? If you try and convert an item that is not a passive into a passive, this will give us a null. And when this gives us a null, we will get null.data over here, which is what gives us a null reference exception. So to prevent this from happening, we just check whether this p is null first before we actually do the check for p.data. And the same thing over here. It's just a minor bug fix to these two get functions. If you recall in part 15, the get function is responsible for finding us a particular copy of a weapon or a passive. So once that is done, we have the new PlayerInventory script with everything fixed. So this is just a run through of the fix. Again, you can find details inside the forum post. I will not apply these fixes for now because later on we're going to make more changes to the PlayerInventory script, and I'll run through all these other changes as well. So it's going to integrate all the changes that we have from here, and in this video we're going to show you also a snippet of the entire script, and then we're going to highlight the parts that are changed, and then of course we're going to highlight the parts that are deleted as well, like the old functions that are no longer needed. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is, once we have fixed this bug, I thought that we should go one step further and just improve the level up UI as well, because we have a couple of issues with the level up UI. Let me just show you what the issues are. First issue is that if you have the level up UI here, let me just enable all the options. If I try and change the size of the window, if it gets too small, then the UI gets cut off, which is not great, right? And the second issue is that the level up screen does not accommodate, if you look at in Vampire Survivors, for example, right? Sometimes it shows 3 items, sometimes it shows 4, and depends on what your luck stat is. We don't factor this into the equation, so I'd like to do that as well for level up screen, since we are recoding and improving upon it. And then third, our level up interface does not show us the level of the item, so this is also a problem, right, which we want to rectify. And by recoding this, because later we're going to code it in a modular fashion, we are also able to integrate in a future part. Whenever a passive or a weapon contributes to weapon evolution, you will see in the game it shows you the icon of the weapon or the passive that evolves. And then finally, most importantly, right, the reason why we are redoing this whole thing, okay, and one big drawback of the current level up screen is that it's very tightly coupled with the player inventory script, which causes a really annoying problem. Is how I will best describe it, because the code right now is very non-modular. Why is it non-modular? Because it's very tightly knitted with our player inventory code. And whenever you have code that is very tightly integrated with something else inside your program or your game or your application, problems can happen. So let's talk about modularity over here. Okay, what is modularity? Modularity is basically the idea that whatever you do, right, whatever component that you create, it has to be as adaptive as possible to different situations. Let me give you a very simple example of what modularity is. If you look at this mouse over here, right? Okay, this mouse over here, I can just plug this mouse, the USB connector, into any computer and it works. The same as it does in my computer. So this is modularity. So this mouse is a complete piece of, it's a complete, what do you call this? It's a complete piece of hardware, right? So it works anywhere as long as it can plug into the correct component. So ideally, when we create components in Unity, what are components again? Like, for example, player inventory is a component, right? And then you have things like, for example, your rigid bodies are a component, box sliders are a component as well. These are all coded modularly. Modularly means that you can move them somewhere else and it will still work. So whenever you create a script inside C#, particularly because it is an object-oriented language, you will want it to be as modular as possible. And right now, our level up screen is really not modular because it's just so tightly integrated with the play inventory script. If you remove this screen from the play inventory script, it just doesn't function at all. And we want to rectify that, because in the future, let's say if you want to make the level up apply to your treasure chest as well, for example, you pick up a treasure chest and it's gonna open the upgrade screen. If you want to be able to do that, then this upgrade screen has to be decoupled with your player inventory script. I hope I'm making sense. Huh? So because of that, we want to code everything modularly. And of course, again, if you refer to all the components in Unity, everything is always coded modularly. So we want our scripts and we want our prefabs to also follow the same philosophy over here. So this is why we are recoding the entire level up screen. Okay, number one, to make it adaptive, and number two, to make it modular. So to start off, we're just gonna make this whole thing adaptive first. And the first step to making a UI component adaptive is to, before you even split the anchor, right? It's to find, okay, this is the component that we want to make. This is the game object that we want to make adaptive. First thing you will see is that if you try to resize it, everything breaks. So this is really not adaptive. So why do we want to make it so that we want to try and resize it? Because later on, to make it adaptive, we're going to have to split the anchor. Splitting the anchor is basically just so that when you change the size of the screen, the component changes as well. Right, so if you cannot resize the component without breaking it, then you cannot split the anchor, because when you split the anchor, it's going to resize this element anyway, and this will break the element. So we're just going to rearrange the element in a couple of ways to make it so that it becomes adaptive, and then we're going to split the anchor. All right, so the first thing we want to do is to not have it break whenever we resize this thing, right? It's very simple thing that we're going for here, and what we want to do is do you see this background over here? So the first problem is that when we resize this container, the background doesn't go along, and we're gonna have to move this background into the holder over here and add a component called the layout element, right? Because what happens is that if we do not have this layout element, the background is gonna become a part of the vertical layout group. What the vertical layout group does is that it just basically lays everything out vertically. So whatever components I have, they all just laid out vertically by default, right? And if we add the background into it, then this becomes a part of the vertical layout, which is why it appears below all of them. And notice that you cannot change the X and the Y values over here. So if I were to do an ignore layout over here, you will see that now this becomes available. It becomes possible for me to change the width and the height and the position and everything. Yeah. So instead of changing the position, I'm just gonna now stretch this. Okay, so once I add the layout element, you will see that I'm able to position the background to cover the entire element so that I can just scale the whole thing together. Alright, background and the border. But once I do that, notice the background also covers the border. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna just copy this image over here. I'm gonna paste this on the background component over here. Or maybe I should paste the background onto the image component under the holder. Just give me a moment and pasted the wrong thing. So I'm gonna put the background in the holder, and I'm gonna change the background element itself to show the border instead. So I'm just swapping things around. This will be sliced and multiplied by 3. So once I swap the image elements around between the background and the holder, you will see now the border appears in front, and then the background appears behind. So now the background is actually responsible for the border over here. And then when the background is there, you will find that the buttons become unclickable. And this is because the background is now blocking all the buttons. So I have to make sure that whatever background I have to uncheck raycast target as well, so that my buttons remain clickable. If you want to just test this out afterwards, just turn on the level up screen and then click on the buttons over here. You should see there's some small reaction on the button itself that shows you that the buttons are still working. If the background is not raycast target unchecked, it's gonna prevent you from clicking on the buttons in some instances. I think in my instance it doesn't stop it, but it's still best to just disable raycast target just in case it's a blocking element. So once we've done that, you will see that now everything scales fine. If you select the parent element and scale, everything kind of scales fine, but the buttons are still giving us problems because if I scale it down, the buttons are still expanding beyond the boundaries. For that, we will have to go to the vertical layout group on the holder and check control child size over here. And then let's set a small padding on the left and right as well. That will give us, some border at the sides. And I'm gonna set the child alignment to upper center as well if you haven't done that already. And this allows us to scale everything like that. Okay, so if you want to also, you will see now it doesn't scale the button size vertically. So I'm gonna check also control child size and child force expand. Later we're gonna uncheck these fields again, but right now we're just checking them so that later on we can, so that now when we scale the element, we can see it be properly responsive. So one thing you'll find is that once we have all these things checked, actually we still have some problems here. If I scale this down, you will see that the text will overlap with the icon and so on and so forth. So next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna have to make the buttons responsive as well. And for that to happen, we will have to do a slightly different thing. So for the button, right, let me just show you how I'm planning to arrange it. I'm planning to arrange it as follows. So I'm planning to arrange it so that we have the image at the side, and then the title at the top, and then the description at the bottom. And notice also all the anchors are split. I'm going to show you what this means later on. Okay, so I'm just going to go to one of the buttons over here. So you will see the buttons over here have background, description, name, option button, right? I'm just going to move these things around. I'm going to move the icon all the way to the side of the screen over here. I'm going to have it take up 20% of the screen. So I'm changing the anchors directly over here, but you see that when I change the anchor, this anchor of the element actually changes as well. So I'm going to set the Y to 0 and 1 so the anchor stretches across the entire element over here. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is set left, top, right, and bottom to 0. So you will see that this whole element covers the 20% of the left-hand side of the screen. And then for the border, I'm going to do the same thing. Just make sure it's stretched. And icon, same thing. I'm going to make sure that it's stretched as well. Okay, later on, we'll do a couple of things to fix the stretching issue. All right, so once we've got it to populate 20% of the screen, next thing we want to do is to grab the background sprite, and then let's just add a square to it. Okay, the reason I want to add a square to it is because if we do not add a square to it, we will not have the option to, additional options to work with. I'm going to add a square right here. And this will give me preserve aspect, which forces the image into a square. It doesn't always force the image into a square, but a square is, it's even in the width and the height, right? This is why it forces the whole thing into a square. I'm going to do this for the border as well. I'm going to set the image type to simple and then preserve aspect, again to force it into a square. An icon, same thing, preserve aspect forces it into a square. So for the icon, probably I also want to introduce a little bit of margin at the sides so that it kind of doesn't touch the borders of the icon. And then for the background over here, what I'm going to do is you will see that in certain sizes, the border of my icon touches the borders of the button. Right? If I were to say expand this, in certain cases, you'll see that it might not touch the border, but it either touches the top border or the left or right border. So to fix this, I also want to go to the background, the parent object over here, and just introduce a slight margin on the left, the top, the right, and the bottom. This is to make sure that no matter how I size the holder, it does not touch the sides of the box. So these are just little tricks that you can apply to almost any Unity project that you have, and this will work to make something responsive. It's not the best. Unity has a new UI system called the UI Toolkit, which actually works better, but we will explore that when Unity 6 comes out. I'll explore. I'm thinking if I want to port the whole thing over to the new UI Toolkit, because the canvas is not going to be replaced. It's just going to exist alongside the new UI Toolkit. And the UI Toolkit is a lot better at making things adaptive than the canvas. I'll explore the reasons why later on after we make this whole thing responsive. Next thing I want to do is to grab the name over here, and again I want to split the anchor, and I want to do it by modifying the anchor value over here instead of modifying the anchor by pulling it directly, because it's less accurate if I do that, right? So because the image takes up 20% of the screen, my title is going to start from 20% and go up to all the way to 100%. So it goes like this, and I'm gonna also get this to go from 20% of the screen like that. So I may want to move this lower a little bit actually, so that it doesn't touch right at the edge. And then again, I want to set left, top, right, and bottom to 0. And very important, you want to make sure that overflow here is set to overflow so that text always appears. Otherwise, if your box is too small, I'll show you, then the text disappears. If over here this is set to truncate. Okay, very important over here to set this to overflow. And you just get everything back to its original size. And why is the text still smaller than usual? It's strange. Okay, I want this guy to stretch across the entire, sorry, wrong thing here. Okay, I think everything is great now. So I want to align this to the left as well. And I think everything looks great over here. And the font size is fine. Maybe I want to reduce it a little bit. And then upgrade description, same thing. Okay, just want to play around the values until the anchor goes to the places that I want it to go. So 0.2, and then this will be 1. And here, this will be 0.7. And 0 to 0.7, right? Sounds about right. And this will be the upgrade description. Set left, top, right, and bottom to 0. And then you will get something like this over here. I want to stretch, of course, the text space to cover the entire space of the anchor. And if this affects you and you don't like that, you can just introduce a little bit of space between the top and bottom sections of the text, and then of course reduce the font size a little bit and introduce some border at the sides. Okay, so I'm gonna have border of 5. Same thing for the title. The right border is 5, and then top and bottom you don't really need borders, right? So we end up with something like this, and this allows us more space for the upgrade name and the description to work with. So later on, we're gonna add the evolution over here in the next part of this series, not in this video, right? Future video. And we're also gonna add one more element at the bottom for the level, and this level text is gonna show us the level of the item, or if we have never had this item before, this is gonna show us new. So over here, I'm going to just move the background a little away from the bottom by moving the anchor upwards. So instead of having this occupy 100% of the vertical space, I'm going to have it occupy only 80%. And bottom here will be set to 0. And then once that is done, I will just add a new Text Mesh Pro into the button right here. And this will be the level. And this will say level 1. The font size will be, say, 10. Just something small, right? And center align, vertical align. And I'm gonna again speed the anchor like this. This will be 0, 0.2, and then 0.8 and 1. Sorry. This will be 0, 0.3. This puts it right at the bottom over here, which is again what we want. And then we set everything 0, 0, 0, 0. And this moves the text to the bottom of the icon. So we can actually align it to the top. I think that makes a bit more sense over here. And we can also just add a little bit of bottom margin, maybe 5, and top margin of 5. And this pushes everything away. And left and right, let's say margin of 5 as well. Okay, so what we have here then is the level at the bottom over here. And we have the whole thing being responsive. So if I change the size of the holder, you will see that this thing adapts accordingly to the size of my screen. Okay, so this is again still not ideal, but you know, now we have the whole thing responsive. You might want to play around with your settings a little bit. Just make sure that whatever you do with the layout, just fit the anchor, and then if you resize the element, you will find that this actually works pretty okay if you do that. And once you have this, the next thing you want to do is, let me just touch up the level text a little bit more. Top to 0, bottom 5. Okay, I think this works fine. Okay, you're gonna have to play around with the configurations till you find something that works for you. And once you do that, the last thing you want to do is just split the anchor for the parent object, the upgrade options for them. So in the article, right, we actually made a duplicate of this game object over here, but I just edited it directly. But for you, it might be safer if you duplicate it and then call it new, and then you disable the old. Okay, I think this would be a better way of doing things so that you don't overwrite the old configuration in case the new one breaks. So I did it a little bit too late, but if you haven't done this already, you might want to undo everything and then just do it on a copy. So with that done, the button is responsive. So we have background and buttons and everything. The next thing you want to do is to grab this game object and then split the anchor for it as well. Again, I like to just type the values in, and then I want to see where the anchor goes to see how much space this whole thing takes up. So this is going to take up 80% of the vertical space and 50% of the horizontal space. So I'm just going to set the anchors as follows, and I'll set everything to 0, and you will see this whole thing stretch out to take up a certain portion of the screen. So with the anchor split properly and the whole element made responsive, you will see that if I change the size of the window, this whole thing adapts itself. Okay, which makes it a lot more versatile, right? A lot more robust. Of course, at certain screen sizes, you will still see that, you know, things may break. So for that, if you want to fix that, let me just delete the other options and then duplicate the new options over here like that. So now that I have this, right, you will find that at certain screen sizes, everything still kind of breaks. So if you want to make a fix for that, you can also go to your canvas element and then just under the canvas scaler here, you can set this to scale with screen size, and then you can set the reference resolution to kind of control the whole resizing a little bit and make sure it doesn't go out of control. Yeah, so this is one thing that you can play around with, or you can just try and split the anchor in a more elegant manner. So this is not the best configuration because it's done very fast, but you can try and play around with the anchor values to see if you can get level text, for example, to align better with the rest, with the image and everything else. Okay, so we have a rough skeleton of our new upgrade window, which is adaptive, which is great. Couple of limitations we have: you can't really do this for mobiles. So what you want to do is, what I'll do is my fix is I will just force the game to, if you're exporting this onto Android, I will just force the game to run on landscape mode. I will not allow the game to run on portrait, which is like that. At certain screen sizes, everything still breaks, so this is not the best option, but you know, it's a lot better than before. Now I can have different screen sizes, I can have large screens and small screens, and everything still kind of works, right? So it's an improvement. So what is the other limitation? The other limitation is that if you were to try and make this whole thing look better on mobiles, then if you were to go back to landscape view, right, you will see that everything will break again. So we just have to make do with what we have, which is right now this is designed for a horizontal screen. So just prevent the player from playing this game on landscape mode, on portrait mode. And this can be done in a couple of ways. You can go to build settings. I don't have Android installed here, but if you go to the Android export settings, there's an option for you to select whether the game can be played on portrait or not, and you just gotta uncheck the options. Okay, so later when we edit the video, I'm just gonna add this portion into the video as well. So now that this is done, the next part for us will be to create a script for the UI upgrade window, right? But before we do that, we have to streamline access to the level data of an item. What does that mean? That means that because we are going to be dealing with, my phone keeps ringing. So we're going to be dealing with items as a generic type, not really generic type, but as a superclass. Okay, so what this means is that when we are writing our script for the UI upgrade window, right, we will, instead of managing weapons and passives separately, we're going to manage them all as items. But to do that, we have to be able to get the level data of the item, which is currently not possible. Okay, currently it's not possible to do this. We have to convert the item data into either a weapon or a passive before we can get the level data of an item. And the reason for that is because if you look at the item script, you will see that there is no, item data script, there is no get level data function. All right, but inside the passive data script, there is a get level data here. And inside weapon data, there is also a get level data function over here. And the get level data function works to basically give you the stats of their weapon in that particular level, and the same thing for the passive. But the reason why they work differently is because passives manage different set of stats. Because weapon stats are different from character stats, right? And then the passives will boost the character stats. And therein lies the problem. If we were to try and implement this for item data, we will not be able to do it, because does the item data return weapon stats? Or should the item data return a passive modifier? This is the problem. But then if we want to manage our items in our inventory as items instead of as weapons and passives, we have to find some way to sort it out. And the reason we want to do that is because we don't want to be repeating our code multiple times. Because if you look at this, right, if we have to convert the item data to a weapon data or passive data before doing get level data, we have to repeat our code multiple times. And you see the logic is more or less the same. It's just that, you know, there's just slight differences in the text over here and over here, right? Which is well, which is not a very ideal situation to have. Okay, I just realized that the Patreon credits are not moving. So probably we're gonna have to, I'm so sorry Patrons, we're gonna have to split up or like cut off this section. Or maybe I'll just re-record the Patreon credits later on. I think that can work. Okay, anyway, let's get back to recording the video. Okay, so where were we? So we were here, right? Okay, so the solution to this is to make a couple of changes to the item class so that we are able to add this GetLevelData function onto our item. And it is done as follows. I'm just gonna go to item data over here and add a new function over here that returns. So before we do that, let's go to item over here and then let's add a class. This class is gonna be called level data. It's gonna be serializable. And it's basically gonna contain a name and a description. So what this level data is gonna do is it's gonna serve as a parent class for the weapon stat, as well as the passive modifier. Sorry, the passive modifier, which is right here. Okay, so I'm gonna have to change this to class. This will inherit level data, and then this will take away the name and description because we define inside here. And then we're gonna move to weapon as well. And then from the weapon here, we're gonna remove this and set this to class. Weapon. Sorry, this should be level data, right? What this does is that this creates a common parent class for stats and modifier. And then this allows us to go back to item over here, level data, right? So when we go back to item data, we're able to create a new function over here that returns item level data. And let's make it abstract as well. And then get level data. So what this does is that now we have a parent definition for get level data, which is separately defined inside the weapon data class. Right now, this will have to return item level data. Can no longer return the original variable type. But because a weapon stat is also a level data item, sorry, an item level data, so we can have this as a return value, but return weapon stats. And then same thing for passive data. Gotta do an override here, and then this will return item level data. So you see now we're able to kind of create a parent definition for get level data so that we can use get level data inside the item level. So that means that we can do something like this now with the changes that we have made in the script. So the next thing I want to do is, now that we have made these changes, there is also one thing that we have to do, or rather a couple of things we have to do, because now the get level data function actually returns level data, right? This creates a couple of errors in our code. And we have to go back and rectify these errors. Why? Because we are dealing with weapon stats in weapon, for example, right? But then you see here get level data used to return weapon stats, but now it returns item level data. So we have to cast this to weapon stats, which, because it's inside a weapon class, so we can just use stats. And if we go further down and look at the other errors under passive, okay, under passive we have a similar situation over here. We've got to cast this to modifier, okay, passive modifier, right? So we can just bracket this because we're just casting the result of get level data into a passive modifier, and the errors will be gone. And the next error that we have over here, we don't have to worry about, because the next error we have over here will involve the changes to the weapon, sorry, to the PlayerInventory script, which is right at the bottom. So let me just scroll all the way to the bottom, and okay, so this next error, let's just ignore this for now. because I am just going to copy the UIUpgradeWindow script over here in the article and just drop it into a new script here. And then I'm also going to copy the PlayInventory script at the bottom and drop it into my PlayInventory script. And I'll explain the changes after I've copied and pasted everything. But once I copy and paste everything, then we should get all the errors going away. And for us to get the upgrade screen working, let's get it working first and I'll explain the code that's involved. All right, so for us to get this working, I'll just have to go and find my PlayInventory. And over here, what I want to do is look at this upgrade window variable. Okay, we just want to assign. Let's go to our upgrade window here. I'm gonna uncheck width and height. Sorry, just the height. Sorry, I'm not gonna uncheck width and height, just the height. And then width will remain checked. And then I'm gonna add the UI upgrade window over here. And once that is done, I am going to have to delete the other upgrade options and create a new text mesh pro here, and this will be called tooltip. And this tooltip will be insert. You can insert a tooltip over here and center align, and then reduce the font size a little bit. So this tooltip is going to be for, you know, when you level up, it's going to say like this stuff over here, right? The luck stuff. So this is for that. So we add that tooltip over there, and then we can go to the upgrade window script that we have, and then just drop the option and the tooltip. Okay, another option is if these are blank, you can also just name this upgrade option and name this tooltip. And then what you want to do is just, if you just add the script, automatically it tries to find the correct elements for you. I'll explain how this works later on, but if you put the correct name over here, it will just automatically populate the tooltip and the upgrade option template for you as well. Okay, next thing I want to do is inside the button. So how this is going to work is the script that we have is going to take this first button as a template and duplicate as many buttons as we need to show the upgrade window. So what's going to happen here is that there are actually some paths at the bottom over here, and these paths are for access to the icon. This is the icon, the description, the name, the button, as well as the level text. So then whatever the name of these children elements have to correspond with the paths that you have inside the script over here. So for example, this icon path is I'm gonna have to rename this to icon, and then this is gonna have to be called item icon. I'm also just gonna name this border, and then upgrade description is just gonna change the description, and then upgrade name is gonna change the name, and button here is gonna change the button, and then this will cause the paths over here to match the paths that you find inside upgrade option. Okay, icon / item icon, description, name, button, level. Okay, so either you change the name of your elements inside the button, or you change the name of the paths over here. Okay, whichever you want. Next important thing is you've got to set the max options that we have for the upgrade screen, as well as the color of the new text. This is going to be, I'll show you how this works later. So you have yellow text and white text as well. So I'm just gonna go to, after all this is set up, I'm just gonna go to the PlayInventory script and then just move the UI upgrade screen over here. All right, so whenever the player levels up, the PlayInventory is gonna pass a list of all available upgrades to the upgrade window, which will show the upgrade window. So this, because now the upgrade window is separated from the inventory, right? Later on when we have treasure chests, for example, this will allow us to also hook the treasure chest onto the level up screen if we need it to allow the player to level up and all that stuff. All right, so if you hooked everything up properly, if I were to level up now, you will find that the options will appear accordingly. And if it doesn't, it means that I missed an error somewhere. Let me just show you where the error is. The error is right here. Okay, so just now when I modified the scripts, I forgot to fix a bug that is mentioned in the article. And the article has a bug that's right here. Where is it? Okay, anyway, let me just explain to you what's going on here. So the error is caused because if I would get level data for level 1, this is going to be 1 minus 2, which will give us minus 1. And because this is an array, it does not take minus 1 as an index, which is why the error occurs. So I just have to make a check and see if level is less than or equal to 1. I'll just return the base text of the passive. And in the case of weapons, I'll just have to do a check over here that says if level is less than or equals to 1, return again the base text. Okay, so this is going to be pretty basic over here, and this will fix the issue, and then I will be able to see the options appear when we level up. There we go. Okay, so let me just explain how this entire script for the UI upgrade option works. This is going to be quite a bit of talking. Okay, so we have seen over here all the options, right? Let me just explain the max options, new text color, and level text color. Okay, so the first thing you will find is that when you level up now, you will get to see which options are new and which options are existing. So for example, all the options are new here. If I click on hollow heart here, this is going to give me, this is going to be an existing item that I have now, right? You just get that level up. So you will see here all new items. So it's going to be like this. But you see, once I have an item existing and I get an option for it, it's going to show level 2 instead of new. So this new text is basically set right here. And then the color, and then the color of the level text. So everything is settable, so you can make the upgrade window very customizable in a very easy manner as well. You just got to build the layout for it, and then the rest of the stuff, the component can handle it. So let's just run through the code. Okay, the code basically only has a couple of functions. Let me just run it through in my Visual Studio. Okay, so the important thing over here, the code has a couple of components. So whenever I read through code, okay, the code that I'm sharing with you on the blog or on this video is going to be commented, so you can pause the video and then read through the comments, kind of get a sense of what's going on. Okay, I'm not going to go through the variables because the public variables are for you to set, and the private variables are basically there because we have to store some state information regarding the upgrade window. Okay, so the most easy way for you to understand what the code does is, of course, to read the comments, but also to look at the functions that are involved in getting the whole thing to operate. In this particular case, in most cases for codes, you want to look at the update function, because the update function usually contains most of the logic that makes the GameObject function. But in this case here, because upgrade window is reliant on some other component to get itself to work, right? The most important function here is actually set upgrades, because set upgrades basically takes a player inventory, takes a list of possible upgrades, it picks 3 or any other value, and then it also can optionally show a tooltip. So this is the most important function, because in the player inventory script, right, what happens is that we just basically removed let me see, let me show you what I removed in the player inventory script. In the player inventory script, what happened is that we basically removed the upgrade options and then we replaced it with the upgrade window. And more importantly, right, in the changes that we discussed earlier, right, where we changed the apply upgrade options, we also removed the codes to populate the upgrade window, and as well as all the other functions over here that were part of the old system of populating the upgrade window. And what happened is instead we have a new section over here that does a couple of things. The main thing is that it just goes to the upgrade window and it sets the upgrades. And then the upgrades that are set are basically, this is the player inventory, right? This is which inventory you should apply the bonuses to, because in the future, if this game were to go multiplayer, then we will have multiple player inventories. So we will have to make sure that the upgrades are set for a specific player inventory. This is the available upgrades that we calculate above. And then these are the number of options over here. Okay, so either you have 4 upgrade options, or you have 3 plus a tooltip that says increase your luck stat for a chance to get 4 items. And then if also there's one more provision over here, okay, if there are no more available upgrades, then we will just end the level up so that we don't get stuck in the level up screen when we have no more upgrades to receive. So this is the change, and basically this tells us that the most important function that we have in the UI upgrade window is the set upgrades function, which again takes the inventory, possible upgrades, number of options to show, and then the tooltips. Okay, so you might be wondering why we have 2 ways to set the number of options. So this max option here is a hard limit. So if I set the max options to 4, then that means that the window can take no more than 4 items. 4 items will fill up the entire thing. If I set this to 6, for example, right, then the options will always make space for 6 options. Right? So the max options here basically kind of controls the height of each button, because if I have 4 here, then each button will take up 1/4 of the screen. This parameter here actually allows us to select or show only, for example, if I have max options of 4 and I have 3, I want to show 3 options, then basically you'll see each option will take up 75% of the screen. So this argument over here does a different thing from the max options option that we see in the settings under the component. So in the code itself, what it does is that basically it calculates how many options to show. And then what it does then is that it checks, because we only have 1 button, right? So the code is responsible for duplicating the buttons, all right? And then hiding and showing the tooltip as well, okay, which we'll get to later on. Okay, so over here, this is the hiding and the showing of the tooltip. It's just gonna update the tooltip template GameObject with the tooltip that we have passed inside the function. And then basically it will decide whether to show the tooltip or hide the tooltip based on whether the tooltip has any text inside. If the tooltip has no text inside, this will be set to false. Alright, this whole thing is a conditional logic, right, which evaluates the true or false. So this either becomes true or false, and then first active takes true or false. Right? This is how this whole thing works. Okay, so this logic here, it's just a way of getting the GameObject to hide or show without having an if-else condition. And then finally, what we do is that we will look through all the upgrade options, and then we will look through the possible upgrades. And then what we have here is that if we have a valid upgrade, then we will just show the upgrade inside the upgrade window. And then here, all the code here is just to insert the name text, the level text, description, the icon, and the button. Okay, so you're gonna have to read through the code and read through the comments and kind of get a sense of how the logic works. It's really hard for me to explain all of this stuff, because if I go into the detail, you're gonna have to, it's not gonna really help you if I go into the details. You just have to read the code yourself and try and understand the logic that's going on. And if you have any questions regarding this, you can always go to our forums, and then you can highlight the section of the code that you have questions with, and I will be happy to answer your questions in the forum. The link to the forum is in the pinned comment of the video once this is up. Okay, right at the end of set upgrades, you will find there is a function called recalculate layout. And what this does is this function, what it does is it basically controls the height of each of the options. Let me show you what I mean by this. So if I were to change the size of this, you will see that the height also changes, even though inside our holder, we don't actually set the height option for the vertical layout group. And the reason for this is simple. It's because if I were to do this, you see that the spacing sometimes goes off. Okay, if I were to hide and show the options, sometimes it just doesn't come back right. Yeah, and if I hide options, you will see that automatically the rest of the options will expand to cover the rest of the screen, which is something that I don't want to have. So this was why I let the UI upgrade window script handle the spacing for your options instead. So if I let the UI upgrade window script handle this, you see that if I increase the max options over here, it will change the option size of each of the options as well. Let me just show this to you. So you can use max options to control the height of each option. You see that? If I increase max options to 6, the next time this appears, you will see that the space that we have gets even more narrow. Okay, so this is controlled by max options. This shows you the height of each of the buttons. Okay, so this allows us to play around with the UI upgrade window a lot more, because now we have options that we can kind of tweak to control how the buttons display. This controls the height of each of the options. Yeah, so recalculate layout is just there so that every time we set upgrades, we will just recalculate the size of all the buttons. Yeah, all this is logic just to change the size of the height of each of the buttons as well as the height of the tooltip. And basically what it does is evenly spaces out all the buttons and the tooltip. And how this is done is again based on max options, right? So this is recalculate layout, and then we have update over here. And then what update does is it just constantly checks whether the screen has changed, and it does so by having a variable last screen, which you find on top. And this last screen variable over here is what it does is that it just records every time the screen size changes, then the layout gets recalculated and it records the new screen size. So over here, it just checks if the screen has changed from the last screen. If it doesn't change, then we don't have to call recalculate layout. Okay, simple as that. And awake is just for us to populate some variables. So if you look at the vertical layout here, why do we need that? Because we need to figure out the padding and spacing for each of the items. So we want to retrieve some of the data from the vertical layout group, which is why we have a little variable over here. This vertical layout is used in the recalculate layout function over here. It's just the math, okay, because if I want to find out how much height each of the options have, then I will have to calculate the total height and divide it by the options that we have. And this is what's happening. And then this is just automatically just to disable the button, right? And then tooltip when it first activates. And what this piece of code here does is that it gets the transform component of our game object and converts it to a rect transform. This is so that we can set the height and everything. Because if we have a normal transform, the normal transform only has position, rotation, and scale. So we have to convert a transform into a rect transform for us to be able to control all the specific values that only a rect transform has. And finally, we have reset. What reset does is, reset basically allows us to, if you notice, when I first add the script to the game object, automatically this is populated. See that? And this is done because I have the reset over here, and what reset does over here, it just tries to find a game object called upgrade option, tries to find a game object called tooltip, and then puts it into these corresponding variables. Yeah, so if you've set everything up right, then you will find that your upgrade window will work. As for the code I spent a lot of time writing it, and I've spent a lot of time writing the comments as well. And for you to really understand how it works, you have to go and read the comments. I'm so sorry that I can't really explain the code any better than I already have. So that's all for this part. For the next part, we're going to be covering a different aspect of the UI before we move on to redesigning the enemy spawning system. And what this different aspect of the UI is essentially so we have the inventory slots as well. And the inventory slots that we currently have is very non-modular, right? Because we have an inventory section on the HUD, the game HUD. And when you win the game or lose the game, you also show all the inventory slots. And every time we have to show inventory slots, we manually code it. But what I want to do instead is I want to have a prefab in the same way that I have this upgrade options folder, and this can be turned into a prefab, right? And then we can reuse it somewhere else. Okay, so this can be called the level up screen. You can call it whatever you want, a level up window. Okay, so once you have this, you can, for example, prefab this, and then this will become something that you can reuse again, right? We want to do the same thing for, oh, what's going on? Did I just break this? Oh, I just broke this. How do I fix this? This experience bar is supposed to be at the, it's not supposed to be in the middle of the screen, right? There we go. Okay, it's back. So we want to prefab this, right? So I'm just going to change the level up window and prefab this. So you can prefab this and then you can reuse it somewhere else, right? The same cannot be said for our inventory slots. Okay, in here as well as inside the results screen. So once we create a proper way for us to display items, we can just prefab this and then just put it inside every section in our UI that requires us to show the inventory. So we don't have to record the showing of the inventory for every single screen that we have, right? Which makes our lives easier as well. So that's going to be the next part where we record the result screen. So thanks for tuning in. It was a very impromptu stream, and if I forget anything else, I'm gonna have to record some extra footage and add it to the video. But the next thing we're gonna do is just to edit the video and then put it together into a part 19, and then we have to animate we have to reanimate our Patreon bar at the bottom as well. So if you tune in, thanks for doing that, and thanks for your support. I love how you guys watch the series and you leave comments and say, oh, you know, this is helpful, it's helped my project and stuff, because this is the kind of comment that keeps us going on, because it's really tedious work, and sometimes it gets really dry for us to document and explain everything. But when we see that it helps you, it really makes all the effort worth it. So thanks for tuning in. I'm gonna have to go and pack my bags because I've got to be up early tomorrow. I'll see you all. Hi the channel. I don't know when you posted, but hi there and goodbye.